So I recently wrote an article about the type of businesses that would survive COVID and those that would take a dive, as well as those that would thrive. I was thinking that time and place are two things that are really important for all businesses, but these factors have really been brought into sharp relief with the COVID pandemic. So I designed a grid which starts off with location, so the physical proximity required to do business. And on that continuum, we have location-dependent businesses on one hand, in the red, and on the other hand, location-independent businesses. So these are businesses that don't require people to be in the same place for the value transaction to occur. On the other y-axis of the grid is time, or synchronicity. So at the bottom of the grid, once again in the red, is synchronous. So synchronous services are those that require people to be on the same time zone or within the same temporal proximity for them in order to do business together. At the other end, the far extreme of that are asynchronous services. So these are businesses that don't require people to be in the same time zone for them to exchange value or to interact. So obviously the businesses that are most severely impacted by COVID are those in the bottom left-hand quadrant. So these are those that will take a dive. And that is because these businesses depend on people being in the same time and place as each other in order to do business. And of course, that's the type of situation that the virus thrives in, right? So the virus is dependent on close physical proximity, and you can only have that if people are sharing the same time and place together. So some examples of businesses that are location dependent and synchronous are sporting events, right? Concerts, things that require gatherings of people. Dine-in restaurants are another good example. The service of the restaurant has to be running at that time during the opening hours, and the people have to go in. The customers have to be in that same time and place. Education, so universities like the ones I teach at are heavily dependent on being at the same lecture theater at the same time as the professor, so same time and place. And so we've had to pivot very quickly, and I'll show you how other businesses can try to do similar things and shift along either their location dependency or their synchronicity in order to be able to pivot and adapt to this current pandemic. So those businesses that are able to survive are those that have they're still location dependent, but they are able to provide some level of asynchronous service. So a good example of that are self-service stations, right? Whether that be retail or petrol stations. So obviously they're location dependent because the customer still needs to go to that place in order to exchange value with the business, such as fill up their car or buy some sort of product. But the difference there is that the business model is designed so that it can deliver value asynchronously. So the customer and the supplier do not necessarily have to cross paths. Even though they have to work at the same place or go to the same place of business, they can stagger it so that the customer does not have to be there when the supplier is refilling the petrol tanks below the self-service stations. Similarly, if you think about something like independent domestic nature tourism, so these are those self-guided walks. Now, provided people can get into the country, they can theoretically continue to experience that service because you organize your own travel, you arrive to that destination, and then you walk the trail or you go through a self-guided tour. And so the place is still important, so it's still location dependent, but the time at which you choose to do that, experience that service, that is asynchronous. And when you can spread out the time, because time is no longer a dependent factor, you can spread out people. And therefore that enables you to continue doing business in spite of pandemics that are caused by close proximity of people being in the same time and place together. So that's one angle, is to take up the time component and provide a service asynchronously. The other option to try and survive is to pivot your business into one that may still be time dependent, so people still need to be doing things at the same time, but location independent. So that's the bottom right hand quadrant there. So a great example I have of that are these live streaming services, so such as electronic therapy, electronic coaching, electronic counseling, electronic consulting, business consulting. Delivery restaurants are a good example of that. So the person has to make the order and the cook or the chef still has to be working at the same time as the order is made, but they've taken the location dependency out of it. So the business has become location independent. And that means that even though the customer placing the order has to be doing the placing of the order at the same time as the service provider, the chef in this case, they don't need to go near each other, right? So it's location independent. Now, the best type of businesses of all, the ones that will actually probably thrive in the current pandemic, are those that are both asynchronous and location independent. So a great example of this are all those streaming services that are probably doing really well right now. They were doing well to begin with, because when you can provide an asynchronous location independent business, you become inherently more flexible and more convenient for the customer. So these businesses were doing well already pre-COVID pandemic. Think about Netflix, think about Fortnite, all those sorts of things that are location independent and do not really require people to be in the same time zone, right? Other examples are when school or education can move online, and so therefore we no longer require students to be in the same lecture theater as us. We make the lectures available at any time and at any place. So then you can continue to do your business without being pinned in by the limitations of time and place. In terms of tourism, this is still obviously very new, but virtual reality is the only way that you can continue to deliver a tourist experience without having the tourist be in that same time and place. So that's probably a little bit more difficult and a way off yet. However, entertainment is one that's already thriving in this area. And online retail, so such as Amazon and eBay, they obviously operate in an asynchronous location independent sort of way. So people can buy what they want, when they need it, and have it delivered to where they want it. So that's how you can look at time and place and try to figure out in which direction your current business can pivot in order to survive the pandemic, but also perhaps even thrive. So thanks guys, and good luck out there.